When Barron Trump became the target of a joke, Melania's bold move sparked a cultural reckoning. The night seemed like any other in the unpredictable world of late-night television. Bright studio lights illuminated the stage as the host, renowned for his sharp tongue and politically charged humor, took his place in front of the audience. The familiar rhythm of the show unfolded, with the crowd laughing on cue, their reactions blending seamlessly with the carefully orchestrated energy of the room. From politicians to celebrities, no one was off-limits in his monologue. His fans expected it, thrived on it. Late-night comedy had long been a stage where public figures were scrutinized, ridiculed, and picked apart for sport. It was a game, a dance between satire and controversy. But then something shifted. In an unexpected turn, the host set his sights on an entirely different target: Barron Trump, the youngest son of the former First Lady and President at the time. The joke was quick, sharp, delivered with the same confident smirk that had become his trademark. The audience reacted, but not in unison. Some chuckled hesitantly, unsure if they should be laughing. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing that a line had just been crossed. It wasn't just another jab at a public figure. It was something else entirely. It was a shot at a teenager who had deliberately stayed out of the limelight, a child who had never chosen to be a part of the political circus that surrounded his family. For a moment, the atmosphere in the studio hung in an odd balance. The host, sensing the tension, pushed forward. He was no stranger to backlash. Controversy was his currency. But even he didn't realize what he had just ignited. Within hours, the clip was everywhere. Social media exploded as users dissected the moment from every possible angle. Hashtags like #BarronTrump and #LeaveKidsAlone trended across Twitter and Instagram. Memes flooded timelines, some ridiculing the host, others attempting to justify the joke under the guise of comedy. The divide was immediate and intense. Supporters of the Trump family condemned the joke as tasteless and unnecessary. Defenders of the host argued that satire had no boundaries, that all public figures were fair game. Heated debates unfolded in comment sections, on news panels, in the editorial columns of major publications. "This is beyond inappropriate," one user tweeted, attaching a clip of the moment. "A child should never be the target of political comedy. This isn't about Trump. It's about decency." But not everyone agreed. "This is what late night is about," another post read. "Satire doesn't pick and choose. If you don't want to be joked about, don't be in the public eye." News outlets seized the moment. The controversy dominated headlines, with journalists debating the fine line between comedy and cruelty. Every aspect of the joke was analyzed. Was it a casual misstep or a deliberate attack? Was the host out of line, or was this a manufactured outrage? For Melania Trump, it wasn't a debate. In Palm Beach, inside the private sanctuary of the Trump estate, Melania Trump sat in stunned silence as she watched the clip for the first time. The words rang in her ears. The laughter that followed echoed in her mind. She had spent years shielding her son from the chaos of political life, carefully keeping him out of the spotlight whenever possible. Unlike his older siblings, Barron had been spared the relentless media scrutiny, until now. And now he had become the punchline of a national joke. A slow, simmering anger built inside her. This wasn't just another insult hurled at her husband. This wasn't about politics. This was about her son. She had endured ridicule before. As First Lady, she had been mocked, criticized, and scrutinized at every turn. But this was different. This wasn't about policy or public image. This was about a child's right to privacy, a child's right to grow up without being dragged into the political arena for sport. Her instincts as a mother kicked in. She picked up her phone and began drafting a statement. The words came quickly, denouncing the host's comments, condemning the use of children as political targets. She knew how the media worked. A strong statement would make headlines. It would force people to acknowledge the boundaries that had been crossed. But as she typed, something felt off. It wasn't enough. A statement wouldn't undo the damage. A few words on social media wouldn't hold anyone accountable. The backlash was growing louder. People were calling for action. Defenders of the joke were doubling down, pushing back harder. If she let this go unanswered, it would send a message that it was acceptable to attack children in the name of entertainment. That was a precedent she refused to set. Melania Trump had never been one to seek out public fights. But this wasn't a fight she could walk away from. She made a decision, one that would send shockwaves through the media. She would file a lawsuit. She knew the weight of such a move. The headlines would explode. The debate would grow fiercer. The late-night host's defenders would paint her as thin-skinned, as someone unable to take a joke. But she didn't care. This wasn't about winning a PR battle. This was about principle. She contacted her legal team, and within hours, the wheels were in motion. The host had crossed a line. Now he would face the consequences. But what Melania didn't know, what no one knew, was that this decision would ignite a battle far greater than she could have anticipated. Because this wasn't just about Barron anymore. This was about the very nature of modern entertainment. This was about the line between humor and harm. And once that line had been drawn, the entire industry would be forced to take a long, hard look at itself. The following morning, as the sun rose over Palm Beach, a statement from Melania Trump's team landed in the inboxes of every major news outlet. It was short but powerful, measured yet firm. With a deliberate choice of words, it condemned the late-night host's comments as inappropriate, irresponsible, and deeply damaging. While some saw it as an attempt to de-escalate the situation, those who knew Melania best understood one thing. This was just the beginning. Despite the statement's diplomatic tone, the controversy only intensified. The airwaves were filled with discussions dissecting every word, every possible interpretation. News segments ran polls asking whether the joke had gone too far. Panelists debated whether children of public figures should be shielded from media scrutiny, or if being part of a high-profile family made them fair game. But Melania wasn't interested in debates. She wasn't just issuing a statement for optics. She was preparing for battle. For years, she had endured criticism and ridicule as a public figure. From her fashion choices to her accent, from her initiatives as First Lady to the media's unrelenting scrutiny, she had weathered every storm with a composed exterior. But this time was different. This wasn't about politics, about her marriage, or even about public perception. This was about her son, and she was done standing by. Her next move was decisive. She reached out to one of the nation's most formidable defamation attorneys, a woman with a reputation for taking on high-profile cases and winning, known for her no-nonsense approach and an impressive record of courtroom victories. The attorney wasted no time drafting the legal documents that would shake the entertainment world to its core. By the afternoon, the lawsuit was filed. The case was built on two primary claims: defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The legal filing painted a stark picture, arguing that while the joke had been framed as humor It had, in fact, crossed a dangerous line. It wasn't just about satire or free speech. It was about protecting a child's right to privacy and dignity in an era where the lines between entertainment and harassment had become increasingly blurred. The lawsuit itself became a media spectacle. Legal analysts pored over the details, speculating on the potential ramifications. News anchors debated whether the case had true merit or if it was a calculated move to shift the narrative. The headlines were relentless, the opinions divided. Supporters hailed Melania's move as a bold stand against bullying. She's a mother protecting her child. What mother wouldn't do the same? One commentator argued on a primetime segment. Social media erupted with messages of support, particularly from parents who saw the lawsuit as a necessary stand against the increasing cruelty of online and televised discourse. Critics, however, were just as vocal. Detractors claimed the lawsuit was nothing more than an attempt to silence satire, a ploy to maintain relevance in the media spotlight. Some insisted that public figures, especially those associated with powerful political families, should be able to withstand comedic scrutiny, regardless of the context. As the world debated, one voice remained conspicuously silent: Barron Trump himself. Those close to the family described him as a quiet, reserved teenager who had never sought out attention. Unlike his older siblings, he had largely remained out of the public eye, his life shielded from the political chaos that surrounded the Trump name. But Melania's actions spoke louder than any words. This wasn't about her reputation. It was about his. The lawsuit had an immediate impact. Sponsors, some of the biggest names in advertising, began quietly pulling their support from the late-night show. Behind closed doors, network executives scrambled to contain the damage, caught between the pressure to support their host and the fear of a costly legal battle. The host, usually brimming with confidence, seemed noticeably more subdued in the days that followed. His monologues were still sharp, but there was an underlying tension, an awareness that his words were now being scrutinized under a different lens. Yet he refused to back down. On his next broadcast, he addressed the controversy head-on, standing by his right to free speech. "This isn't about a joke," he declared, looking directly into the camera. "This is about comedy itself, about whether we can still laugh at the absurdity of public life, or if we're going to let lawsuits dictate what can and cannot be said." The reaction was explosive. Across the country, the debate raged on. Every media platform was consumed by the unfolding drama. Cable news channels devoted entire hours to panel discussions, bringing in legal experts, comedians, and cultural commentators to weigh in. Online forums buzzed with arguments from both sides. Podcasts dissected the situation in meticulous detail, and through it all, the country found itself divided. On one side were those who applauded Melania for taking a stand. "Protecting our kids should never be controversial," one viral post read, accompanied by an image of Barron as a child, walking beside his parents during his father's presidency. Parents, in particular, resonated with Melania's decision. Influential parenting blogs penned think pieces about the dangers of normalizing attacks on children, even in the name of comedy. "Where do we draw the line?" one article asked. "If this is acceptable today, what's next?" But the backlash was just as fierce. Comedians, writers, and talk show hosts rallied around their embattled peer, framing the lawsuit as an attack on artistic freedom. Prominent entertainers warned that this case could set a dangerous precedent, one that might stifle creativity in an industry built on pushing boundaries. "If we start policing jokes, we're on a slippery slope," one popular late-night host declared during a heated debate on his show. Do we really want a world where comedians have to second-guess every punchline? The conversation spilled beyond the media into everyday life. In Los Angeles, a group of college students organized a campus rally to discuss the ethics of free speech, debating whether humor should have limits when it comes to minors. Meanwhile, in a small diner in Topeka, Kansas, a group of retirees sipped their coffee and mulled over the controversy, questioning whether the joke had indeed gone too far. The lawsuit was no longer just about Melania or Barron Trump. It had become a flashpoint for a larger cultural reckoning, one that forced society to ask uncomfortable questions about the balance between humor and harm. Where was the line? And had it already been crossed? As the case gained momentum, one thing became clear. This battle was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. When the trial began in Los Angeles Superior Court, it quickly escalated into the kind of spectacle the media couldn't resist. It was more than just a legal battle. It was a defining moment in the ongoing culture war between comedy, responsibility, and the blurred lines of public discourse. Outside the courthouse, a sea of flashing cameras illuminated the morning sky as reporters, bloggers, and influencers jostled for position. The headlines practically wrote themselves. Melania Trump arrived in quiet dignity, her presence commanding yet composed. Dressed in tailored elegance, she stepped out of the black SUV, flanked by her formidable legal team. The expression on her face was resolute. A mother ready to defend her child with every ounce of strength she possessed. She had been through media storms before, but this time it was different. This wasn't about her. This was about Barron. On the other side, the late-night host made his entrance, his usual bravado muted beneath the weight of the moment. He walked with his attorneys, his lips pressed in a determined line, his usual smirk absent. His supporters cheered as he passed, while his critics jeered, holding signs that read, "Children are off limits," and "Comedy or Cruelty." The trial hadn't even begun, yet the court of public opinion was already in session. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with tension. Every seat in the courtroom was filled. Journalists scribbled notes, cameras clicked in rapid succession, and legal analysts whispered about the case's implications. This wasn't just about a joke. This was about setting a precedent, one that could redefine the boundaries of satire in modern entertainment. The prosecution wasted no time making its case. "The line between comedy and cruelty is thin," the lead prosecutor stated in her opening argument, her voice steady and piercing. "But it is a line nonetheless, and in this case, that line was obliterated." The courtroom fell silent as the infamous clip was played. The joke rang out once more, its impact amplified in the stillness of the chamber. Melania Trump, seated beside her legal team, remained composed, her expression unreadable. "This is not about free speech," her lawyer continued, pacing before the jury. "This is about a child's right to grow up without being ridiculed for sport. This is about drawing a line, one that says we do not target children, regardless of their last name." The prosecution painted a vivid picture of a teenager caught in the ruthless crossfire of media sensationalism. They spoke of Barron's privacy, his deliberate absence from the political stage, and the emotional toll such public ridicule could take on a young mind. Expert witnesses testified about the impact of media scrutiny on minors, emphasizing the long-term psychological effects. But the defense was ready. They leaned heavily on the First Amendment, arguing that the joke, however distasteful, was protected under free speech. They cited decades of legal precedent, highlighting cases that had shielded satirists, comedians, and even journalists from similar lawsuits. "This is about comedy," the defense attorney declared, his voice rising with conviction. "Comedy that has, for centuries, pushed boundaries, challenged authority, and questioned the status quo. If we punish comedians for making jokes, where does it end?" Then came the pivotal moment. The host himself took the stand. He spoke about his career, about the nature of satire, about how his job was to make people think, even if it meant making them uncomfortable. He insisted the joke was not meant to be malicious, that he had simply miscalculated its impact. But under cross-examination, cracks began to show. When asked if he would have made the same joke about the child of a non-political figure, he hesitated. The moment hung in the air like a loaded gun. The courtroom had become a theater of clashing ideologies. Was this a case of censorship, or had the host indeed crossed an unforgivable line? The world waited for the answer. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The tension in the room was palpable as the four persons stood, the verdict in hand. The host was found liable for defamation. A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. The jury had decided that the joke, in the context in which it was delivered, had indeed caused undue harm. The network was ordered to pay significant damages for its role in fostering a culture of sensationalism that had allowed the comment to air unchecked. The judge, a measured voice amid the chaos, made one thing clear in his ruling. This is not an attack on free speech. This is a recognition that humor cannot come at the expense of a child's dignity. The verdict sent ripples through the media world. The implications were immediate and far-reaching. For Melania, it was a bittersweet victory. She had stood up for her son and won. But the experience had been exhausting, the emotional toll immeasurable. As she stepped out of the courthouse, flashing cameras capturing every move, she offered only a brief statement to the press. "I hope this serves as a reminder," she said, her voice calm but firm. "A reminder that words have power, and that with that power comes responsibility." For the host, the fallout was severe. Sponsors began pulling out. The network, once his steadfast ally, distanced itself. His show was placed on indefinite hiatus. In a matter of days, his career, which had thrived on controversy, was now on the brink of collapse. But beyond the personal consequences, the case sparked a broader conversation. Across the country, debates raged on. Comedians feared the precedent set by the trial. Media figures weighed in, some defending the ruling, others calling it an overreach. Late-night television, once a playground for unfiltered satire, found itself at a crossroads. One message, however, remained clear. Compassion must always come first.